In this video, I'm going to talk about the unique relationship between Moon and Mercury, and specifically what it means that Moon is an enemy to Mercury and Mercury is a friend to the Moon, and what happens when these two forces are interacting. All right, once again, thank you for taking time to watch this video, and do me a favor, help support my channel. If you like what you see, thumbs up, like it, subscribe, share it, phone a friend, tell them all about it. And anyhow, so let's just get right into it. So when it comes to talking about Moon and Mercury, it's just really important first and foremost to talk about the fact that they're unique in the fact that when it comes to Moon and Mercury, Moon views Mercury as a friend. Mercury's influence to the Moon is friendly. And then on the other hand, with Mercury, Moon's influence to Mercury is known as inimical, or Mercury views the Moon as an enemy. When we talk about friend and enemy, it's basically the difference between supportive and disruptive. So Mercury's agenda, what Mercury's all about, is going to be supportive of the Moon. What the Moon's agenda and what its general nature and makeup is all about is disruptive to Mercury. And that's kind of a really simple way of understanding the idea of friends and enemies. So a planet's friends is when you see the list and it says that Sun's friends are Moon, Jupiter, and Mars, and Sun's enemies are Saturn and Venus, then it means that as far as Sun's concerned, the energy and the influence of Moon, Jupiter, and Mars are supportive of the Sun's agenda, whereas Venus and Saturn, their general nature and makeup is disruptive to the Sun being able to perform its agenda. So that's the way the relationships work. And Moon and Mercury are so unique because they're the only two planets that share this sort of opposite nature of Mercury being a friend to Moon and Moon being an enemy in return to Mercury. And so what I did, that's the nature of relationships. And so real quick, and one thing mythologically about Moon and Mercury is Moon is said to be the father of Mercury. Mercury is the son of the Moon, son as in child. Mercury is the child of the Moon. Well, it's not just as simple as that. As far as mythology goes, the Moon basically slept around with Jupiter's wife Tara, and then through this union with Tara, Mercury was produced. And so that's basically it in a nutshell. I'm not going to go any deeper into that. But what I do want to go deeper into is the similarities and the differences of Moon and Mercury. So what I did is I created this graphic here just real quick. This is a Venn diagram where, if you're familiar with Venn diagrams, and you know that this is the differences, Moon's differences and Mercury's differences, and this is where they are the same in these the part where the circles overlap. So anyway, what we know about Moon and Mercury, where they're similar, is they're both basically adaptable or changeable or fickle, so to speak, because Moon, we know, both of these planets, both Moon and Mercury, can either be a gentle planet or a cruel planet. Another way of looking at that is that Moon and Mercury can either be a benefic planet or a malefic planet. With Moon, the Moon is known as gentle or benefic when it's waxing. It's known as cruel or malefic when it's waning. Mercury is all about association. If Mercury's by himself, he's known as a gentle planet. If Mercury is conjunct in the same Rashi as gentle planets, then Mercury takes on that aspect of gentle. If Mercury is conjunct cruel planets, it takes on the nature of the cruel planets. So they both have a certain amount of changeability. And then what we know is and when it comes to the planetary castes, Mercury and Moon are both Vaishya planets, and they are the only planets that are known as Vaishya planets, which Vaishya is basically representative of the merchant class of planets. And so merchants are all about taking in certain things and themselves processing it and then giving back something. Like it's an exchange, right? Like money for service. And so both of these planets have something to do with the exchange of information, so to speak. And the exchange of, I'll say more so the exchange of experience and information. And being able to process the things of our lives. Because one thing, things that we know, so mental health disorders are when the Moon, Mercury, and then also Mars are afflicted in a chart. Then we know that somebody could possibly have mental health disorders. And there's a lot more to it, but that's kind of a general blanket statement, a thumb rule, if you will. Now, another thing that is unique, or I'm sorry, that is similar and shared between Moon and Mercury is they both view the sun as a friend. Basically, the solar nature, one solar nature, which is basically the great thing that they're going to work towards that they feel is important, is something that both is supportive of the agenda of Moon and Mercury. And another really interesting similarity about Moon and Mercury is they both have their exaltation and their mula trachona in the same sign. And what I mean by that is not that Moon and Mercury, both of these planets, share the same sign. What I mean is both of these planets independently have their exaltation and mula trachona in the same sign. Meaning Moon has its exaltation and mula trachona in Taurus. Mercury has exaltation, mula trachona in Virgo. These are the only two planets that are like this. Every single other planet, the other 5 embodied planets, all have their mula trachona in one Rashi and their exaltation in another Rashi. And if you want to look at kind of roughly what is exaltation and mula trachona, well, exaltation is basically where a planet is performing at its highest. Mula trachona is basically the root of one's energy. So it's like where they're performing highest is at the same place of where they source their energy from. Just kind of an interesting similarity. So this is where these two planets share some common ground. Now let's look at what's different about these two planets. So basically, Moon, we'll start talking about the Moon. The Moon is about the mind. The Moon is said to represent the manas, the mind. And what does the mind do? One of the facilities or faculties of the mind is that of compartmentalization, which is about being able to see a situation, adapt to that situation, and then immediately come into a different situation, forget that, wipe that slate clean, come into another situation and act completely different way. For example, one goes to work, one knows, okay, this is a work situation, I need to act appropriately, I need to be more professional, etc. One goes home to their children and they're going to act a whole different way where they're going to be more playful or whatever. It's being able to go into different places in life and see it for what it is, perceive it for what it is, and do what one needs to do in that, and to move on, and to constantly be able to move on to new environments, and to constantly be able to adapt to those new environments. What the Moon also represents is one's personal needs. Because like all of these three things are basically saying the same thing. The Moon is known as a lovesick planet because it's always looking to, constant yearning to connect with something new. And those things, the reason why the person wants that is because it's those things, when they get them, they feel validated. It's about, and validation is kind of like an increased sense of self-image. Like that's really going to define who I am. I feel that's who I need to be. I need that thing. I just really need it. I want to have it in my, I want to have it in my space so I can compartmentalize it, right? And then I can move on to the next thing and then get that thing and compartmentalize it and get that thing, etc., etc. It's never ending. It's constantly going. That's the nature of the mind. Now, Mercury, on the other hand, is said to represent the intellect. And the intellect what I put here is rationalization, but I would also like to add here is practicality. Because the intellect is all about establishing boundaries and all about discriminating between all the different objects, understanding what they are, how they are used, the best way that they are used, and the best way to use them and to integrate them into our life. That's basically what the intellect does. It's like there's this, this, and this. The intellect can go and know that this is a pen, and I use this pen to write, and this pen works a lot better at writing than if I were to just lick my finger and try to write on a page or something like that. So that's where the intellect is just knowing what is around us, that is and understanding what all the particulars and the minutia and the differences are and how to best utilize them and implement them into our lives. That's essentially one of the main functions of what Mercury is. It's just that of practicality. It can't be used. You can use this pen for other things, but you can't use this pen if you want to draw a huge mural on the wall. You're not going to want a fine-tipped pen like this. You're going to want to use something else. Mercury is that kind of rationalization, that this is not rational to do a mural with. Anyhow, now also Mercury, what Mercury represents also is thing like our exploration. And it's the exploration, it's the things that we are interested with, that we find fascinating, that we're like, oh, I really like pens or something, or I really like to draw. And since we like to draw, we get interested in drawing, and then what happens is our explorations and our interests that yield skills. And so we become a good artist because we like to use our hands, we get involved, and we constantly draw because we like to, we're interested by it, it's neat. We're just like, wow, that's cool, look what I did, I want to do more of that. And that's what Mercury does. Mercury is that kind of inquisitive nature of, and this has to do with the intellect rationalizing and discriminating. And this also has to do, and you'll see why both of these are, the sun is known as a friend, because it's like the person's individual nature, like our interests and what our needs are, kind of have something to do with what we inherently want to have in our lives that we can't really explain. It's just what we need. And so Mercury, that manifests as exploration, inquisitiveness, and what interests us. And so we develop skills because we like to do that thing. And then Mercury is also the observational scientist, because Mercury is known as what is a neuter planet. He's not a masculine or feminine planet. Most planets are. Moon, in fact, is the planet of femininity and is one of the feminine planets, if not the main feminine planet. And femininity in this nature doesn't mean, it's not a gender thing necessarily, but it's the feminine energy, which is one of passively wanting something. See, an active energy or a masculine energy is that energy of going to obtain and of doing and of applying our energy and going outward. Feminine is about pulling things inward. And so, anyways, Mercury is neither of those. Mercury is the observational scientist. Mercury is all about playing by the rules, but Mercury is not just about playing by the rules, but Mercury is about establishing the rules. Because an observational scientist will understand what the rules are, because it will see what the natural boundaries of things are, you know, how things are going to react with each other. And Mercury is that power of ours of not wanting a single thing one way or the other, or expecting anything to be a certain way, but just observing it. Just saying what happens when these two things interact. And that's what an observational scientist does, just looks at and then takes notes. And understands, okay, well, that's what happens when those two things interact. Now, let's talk about what happens when Mercury influences the moon. Why is Mercury supportive of the moon? Well, the moon is about the mind and compartmentalization. So if you think about that example I gave earlier about being in a certain area of life, like work. Well, what Mercury does, since the moon sees that it's at work, knows that it needs to act friendly, well, Mercury gives moon the idea of just helping moon to understand the parameters and the boundaries of what that work compartment looks like and how best to act there. So people with moon being influenced by Mercury in their chart are people that are better able to adapt to their particular surroundings and play the roles that they need to play in life, because they understand how better to do that, because they see all the boundaries better. They see all the limitations. They see all of the things that they have to work with and how to manage the situation better. And so that's really important when Mercury is influencing the moon. That's what you'll see a lot of. And then also, these are the type of people that are able to better define what their needs are, to express what their needs are even, but more so just be able to define that not only do I have this idea of wanting a car is what's going to make me happy, I know that I want a red car, and I know that what's really going to make me happy is a red 1969 Pontiac, or whatever it is. Mercury will know the options of the different things that will bring it validation, and will know specifically will be able to better describe, because it can better define what its needs are, and will be able to understand how they're practically going to go about getting those things too. Start getting a plan to make those things. So it's a wonderful, when Mercury influences the moon, one is better able to bring out their personal needs that yield validation, and better able to deal with their compartmentalization of life. Now, the reason why Moon is known as an enemy to Mercury is because Mercury is the observational scientist who just wants to take the information at face value as it is and just be completely like, that's the way it is. Now, what Moon does is Moon starts bringing this idea into Mercury, into the realm of the intellect, where it wants things to be a certain way. Moon starving, which in the Logitati of Vashta, the influence of an inimical planet to another planet is known as starvation. So when Moon is starving Mercury, what's happening is it's like the person wants things to be a certain way, and when they get the information, they keep skewing the information to make it work for them, or they get frustrated because the information that they're getting is not what they expect it or want it to be. The intellect gets confused, or the person can get a little bit frustrated, a Mercury Moon person, because they want things to be a certain way, and sometimes they do work that way, but also a lot of times they're going to work in a lot of different angles, because things can happen in many different ways. And this is also a person that will not fit within the rules and boundaries because of personal needs and the way that they want things to be. The person will be so strongly set on things being a certain way that they will ignore the rules, and they can find themselves in trouble, or they can find themselves with frustration and difficulties in life, or they're just disrupted in their ability to follow the rules because they don't want to. They don't see it that it wants to be that way. Like if someone's setting a budget for themselves and they're like, okay, I have this much resources, I have this much capital to work with, I have this much expenses, and that leaves me with this much other stuff, and then I have exactly this much resources that I actually have to work with, or profits or whatever, that I can put into recreation. And then I have this much that, I can put in towards food, and this much that I can put in towards family or whatever, right? Well, the moon-starved Mercury person tends to be people that don't manage their lives as well, because when it comes to this budget example, what they end up doing is they just care so much about the recreation aspect that whole bills thing that they were supposed to do kind of gets overlooked, or the whole food thing gets overlooked, or the whole family gets overlooked, because all they care about is this one thing. And so they're not managing their life because they're caring about the things that their personal needs that they want to get validated for. And then also, one thing I left off of here is a natural karaka. Mercury's the karaka of friendships. With moon starving Mercury, the person can have issues with friends where they just go through a lot of different friends, or they don't hold friends that long, or they have conflicts with their friends, because what ends up happening is a person who has moon-starving Mercury is a type of person who isn't necessarily fair with their friends, isn't fair with them, and play by the rules of friendship. The rules of friendship is you just, let it be what it is. You're like, that person is this way, and I enjoy being around their company. But what happens with the moon-starving Mercury is what they do is they make their needs more important than the friendship. So this can be the type of person who has struggles with friendship because their friends stop talking to them, or they have struggles with them because their friends are feeling that get disrupted, or they feel the starvation because of the person always bringing their own agenda too much. This would be the type of person that always wants to offload all their problems on their friends, or maybe they're too judgmental of their friends, or maybe they demand too much out of their friends. And then, if we're looking at the idea of friends with Mercury delighting the moon, what it's like is a person's friends help them to find their needs, help them to find validation. Like we see all these meetup groups nowadays, and meetup groups are what I think are an excellent example of Mercury and moon, because meetup groups are typically about what? An interest, something Mercury, and making friends there, because it's a bunch of people that share the same interest as you, that you work together with. And like, for example, there's like a meetup group about, let's say you like mountain biking, you go to a meetup group that just does mountain biking. You enjoy that. You enjoy mountain biking. You have those friends around you. They help you to mountain bike. You learn some new things. You have some shared experiences, and you feel validated because of those friends. They helped you fulfill a need, and it's validating. It's enjoyable to be around those people. And so, anyways, my voice is getting a little hoarse here. There's a lot of different things to talk about, but I thought this would be a great starting point and foundation of understanding Moon and Mercury, and how their nature and relationships play together, and why Moon is an enemy to Mercury, Mercury is a friend to Moon, and how that looks out and why it plays out the way it does. And so, once again, if you have something else to add to the conversation, please drop it in the comment section below. I'd love to hear about it. There's probably a million things that I'm not thinking about or didn't choose to vocalize here, and I'd appreciate it if you continue that conversation. And thank you for watching this video, and namaste.